when I said I didn't know where to start with Robert Benchley, I certainly didn't know where to start with Dorothy Parker. She just is too good and has too many things. She speaks to all women, and I don't think anyone that's ever had a love affair or even an argument or with a loved one, and things have gone downhill, that wouldn't understand what Dorothy Parker has to say. I'll start first with her short stories, which I loved. I can see the. There we go. Okay, in this she gives us a little look at her thoughts about polite society at the time, and I don't know any one of us that doesn't have a grandmother or, great-grandmother, perhaps, if you're younger, that doesn't fit Mrs. Whitaker. And in this story, called The Wonderful Old Gentleman, who unfortunately happens to be dying upstairs, and is Mrs. Whitaker's father, as well as Mrs. Bain, who is the poor relation in the entire bunch. Mrs. Whitaker's dress was always studiously suited to the occasion. Thus her bearing had always that calm that only the correctly attired may enjoy. She knew where to place the monograms on linens and how to instruct working folk, in other words, her servants, and what to say in letters of condolence. The word lady figured largely in her conversation. Blood she often predicted, and I've heard this the whole time I grew up. Blood she often predicted will tell. And that, I just, all I could think of was, oh my. And then, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Mrs. Whitaker, throughout this story, it's basically everything, her life revolves around looking right. Not necessarily just in her dress, but in the way that she might appear to other people, in the treatment, for example, of her father, who finally at the end of the story conveniently passes away, and the only one who really mourns is the poor relation who actually took him in, because of course Mrs. Whitaker didn't have room or time in her busy schedule to do so. Another story that I enjoyed very much was The Last Tea, and in that story, at the end of the tea, after she's explained to this gentleman, oh no, I don't really care, I don't have a right to care about what you're doing or if you're going out with another lady. She counters constantly with Wally, who apparently, as she said, he's so crazy. He's probably there now. He's called me up about 100 times today. The gentleman says that he'd pay the check and put her on a bus. And she says, oh, don't bother. It's right at the corner. I've got to fly. I suppose you want to stay and call your friend from here. And then he says, well, it's an idea. Sure, you'll be all right. And that's how it ends. And it's, if you read the story, which is in her complete works, you know that she's been there, and probably, unfortunately, some of us have too. Um, she makes, in some of her writings, she makes a little remark about writers. And let's see, page 67. A Mrs. Madsen, who's much like Mrs. Whitaker in the last story, said, I haven't any use for all these new books. In the 20s, everything was changing, and they were even talking about sex in books, which is something that just really hadn't been done and really wasn't accepted yet in polite society. I wouldn't give them house room. I don't see why a person wants to sit down and write any such stuff. I often think, I don't believe they know what they're writing about themselves half the time. I don't know who they think wants to read those kind of things. I'm sure I don't. And, you know, that was the general consensus. And the Algonquin, the Round Table, they were very, obviously very liberal. And they were able to look at these things in polite society and kind of, well, just sort of laugh at them and make fun. On page, in the book, another one that I liked was a telephone call. And in it, this woman is trying her very best. If I don't think about it, maybe the phone will ring. Sometimes it does that. If I could think of something else, if I could just think of something else. And then she goes through this whole monologue with herself about, he called her darling, and he said that he would call at 5. And basically the entire story is written from a very, very sad point of view. She also starts to sort of go through her mind about their relationship, and okay, she says, no, I must stop. I must think about something else. This is what I'll do. I'll put the clock in the other room. Then I won't look at it. You know, and on and on and on. But then she reminds herself, when he does call, she's going to be oh so sweet, the way she used to be when they first met. And, you know, she wasn't trying to hold on to him so hard. And she said, she says to herself, and it's so true, I was always sweet at first. It's so easy to be sweet to people before you love them. And unfortunately, I think that happens to many of us. She then, you know, and as she laments to God about her situation, she said, things are only bad when they hurt people. We didn't hurt one single soul, reminiscent of her many relationships with married men. You know that. You know it wasn't bad, don't you, God? So won't you let him telephone me now? God, send me to hell. You think you're frightening me with your hell, don't you? You think your hell is worse than mine. And again, you almost cry for this woman. She goes on to mention the evolution of pride, and the real pride, the big pride, is having no pride, she decides in herself. I'm not saying that just because I want to call him. I am not. That's true. I know that's true. I'll be bigger. I'll be beyond these little prides. Then she she goes on, and you know, the entire book is absolutely wonderful, and I suggest anyone that is intrigued by Dorothy Parker. He does, let's see where we are, page 100. Oh, one of the best stories in here is the diary of a New York lady during days of horror, despair, and world change. Well, her manicurist comes over and she puts a horrible tangerine color on her nails. Well, you know, of course, this is a big despair in this woman's world. And, you know, she praises the woman before she comes, and then when she leaves, she said, didn't notice until after she had gone, that damn fool had put that revolting tangerine-colored polish on my nails. Couldn't have been more furious, you know. And you can just what she's furious about and what she's worried about is unfortunately not at all what a thinking person should be. And Dorothy probably knows a lot of these women, and in some way, Dorothy just might be this girl one day despairing. You know, I can imagine her at home, that damn fool, when she notices that the nails are tangerine. And speaking of Dorothy, I know we're getting late, so I would suggest that anyone read this. I do have to tell you that there's, let's see, a book in here. Where is it? That is, oh, there's a book in here, there's a short story in here called Horsey. And I honestly cried when I read it. Mostly because Horsey is the way this nurse looks, and she comes into homes and takes care of people who are much wealthier, well, who are wealthy. And Horsey, of course, is. And when she leaves, the husband of the woman that she was caring for gives her a box of flowers. And as she's leaving the cab, she looks down, and you cry because she has this box with the flowers in it, and she remarks that a man gave that to me. And you can tell she's going to go home and tell her mother exactly, you know, a man gave this to me, and she can save the box. And what, I don't know that there's any woman in the world that hasn't saved some really silly things, but we do. And I think that's what makes us special, perhaps. I hope, anyway. Oh, kitty. Well, I'm fumbling around here. One of the stories in here that's very, very good is The Big Blonde, and in it you discover her penchant for suicide, and you also see that it's just not fair that you're supposed to always be up and always be happy, especially if you're a man's mistress as opposed to his wife. But when you actually can kind of be nasty, you know, you don't have to be all that sweet anymore, luckily. And it's a story, if nothing else, that story you should read. On page, let's see, in one of her stories called The Garter, where the entire story is about a woman whose garter breaks at a party, and she hopes that no one comes over to talk to her because, again, this is just despair. And but you see a little bit of Dorothy in it when she writes, "Once they wouldn't let me in the casino at Monte Carlo because I didn't have any stockings on. So I went and found my stockings and then came back and lost my shirt. Um, she she does an apartment house anthology. Is one. All of her anthologies are wonderful. She talks about if any of you have ever visited, and spent a month at a summer resort, where you have your room, and or if you've worked there, you recognize the people in it. And again, she's talking about the upper crust and trying to make fun of them a little. She's part Jewish, part Scottish, neither of which is, quite waspy enough for the 400, let's say. But she, in it, Mrs. Frisbee is having a dinner party, and of course at the dinner party she goes on to tell her guests that servants she avers would do anything. They cannot be trusted to do the simplest task correctly unless you stand right over them while they are doing it. And basically she a moment's delay in service brings her to the verge of a mental breakdown. She bursts into rapid discourse, like just, I don't know, we have to, this moment of horror. But one is inclined to wonder just why Mrs. Frisbee considers the giving of a dinner party worthwhile, for the wear and tear upon her nervous system which it entails must be appalling. The Monte Carlo Inn. Another book that I suggest that everyone gather and that I just could not get enough of was her poems. And unfortunately, I've marked every single one of them in here, but one of the ones that I like very, very much is The Lady's Reward. Lady, lady, and this is a recurrent theme through her short stories. Never start conversation towards your heart. Keep your pretty words serene. Never murmur what you mean. Show yourself by word and look. Be as swift and shallow as a brook. Be as cool and quick to go as a drop of April snow. And be as delicate and gay as a cherry flower in May. Lady, lady, never speak of the tears that burn your cheek. She'll never win him whose words had shown she feared to lose. Be you wise and never sad, you will get your lovely lad. Never serious be nor true, and your wish will come to you, and if that makes you happy, kid, you'll be the first it ever did. And that's true. That's true, Dorothy. It's one of my very favorites, and one, of course, that there are so many that I like I said, I just couldn't pick them all out, but she does poke fun of herself occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally. Drink and dance and laugh, in the poem The Flaw in Paganism, drink and dance and laugh and lie, love the reeling midnight through, for tomorrow we shall die. But alas, we never do. Another theme that's constant is, of course, the fact that many women are taught at an early age to always be pleasant and, to be a certain way, but this is her story. And if he's gone away, said she, good riddance, if you're asking me. I'm not one to lie awake and weep for anybody's sake. There's better lads than that about. I'll wear my buckled slippers out a dance until the break of day. I'm better off without him anyway. And if he never come, said she, now what on earth is that to me? I wouldn't have him back. I hope her mother washed her mouth out with soap. is Dorothy's is the end of that particular um, poem, and she has a poem in here that's very good, but it's love song, and just to briefly, my own dear love, he's all my world, and I wish I'd never met him. My own dear love, he's all my dreams, and I wish he were in Asia. This is at the bottom of each of the stanzas. And my own dear love, he is all my heart, and I wish somebody'd shoot him. There's one in here called Convalescent, and it reminds me of something that she said when Robert Benchley came to visit her, and she said, Mr. Benchley, just reach over and press that button, and she points out the particular button, and he said, he does it, and then he said, why do I have to do that? And she said, well, that will give us at least 45 minutes apiece. And without an interruption. It was the nurse call button. And if you've been in the hospital, you probably know it. But one of the saddest ones that she wrote, and one of her most famous, is called Resume. Razors pain you, rivers are damp, acids stain you, and drugs cause cramp. Guns aren't lawful, nooses give, gas smells awful. You might as well live. And there were some things written about her that basically reiterated that that sort of thing, that based all of her life, her 4 suicide attempts, and she really was never, she of course was never successful. In fact, she died, she was, what, I don't know, yeah, she lived to be a ripe old age, let's say. And one of the things that, she died at 73. And she for 17 years, her ashes sat in different places, among them in her lawyer's filing cabinet. And it was finally the NAACP took her ashes and they made a little memorial park for her, and it's because they felt that there was a kindred spirit there. Being Jewish, she understood the struggles that a black person would have in New York society, or any society really, at that time. One of the things that's best about Dorothy Parker is that what she says is pretty true, and anyone who's journeying through life's experiences, and certainly anyone who's ever loved and lost, can empathize with her. I felt that she was a woman's writer. I mean, the Algonquin, she was much more than that, and achieved much more than that in her lifetime, as indicated by her remarkable short stories and her poetry. But she spoke mostly to the heart and soul of women. She's most famous for her short bon mots, her quips, and beauty's only skin deep, but ugly goes clean to the bone. That she mentions, and this is mentioned in it's a paraphrase of something she says in one of her short stories. If you want to know what God thinks of money, just look at the people he gave it to. Of course, she wasn't one of those people, necessarily. Not that her upbringing was, she went to a finishing school, she did all the right things, but she didn't have that what is it, blood will tell. And she didn't have that blood. One of the poems that she wrote that again speaks to all women, and actually anyone, I think, that's ever loved, because this does often happen, unfortunately, that by the time you swear you're his, shivering and sighing, and he vows his passion is infinite, undying. Lady, make note of this. One of you is lying. And she got right to the point. She made no bones about it. But as she gets older and a little more critical of everything that's around her, she's quoted as saying, well, actually in the complete poems, she has a poem, and God help me, I can't remember the name of it, but in youth, it was a way I had to do my best to please and change with every passing lad to suit his theories. But now I know the things I know and do the things I do. And if you do not like me so, to hell, my love, with you. And she sort of gets her balance there a little bit. As she puts it, she was pleased to have him come and never sorry to see him go. In the 20s, Dorothy Parker was one of those people that I think there's not one of us that hasn't heard the old in the morning, in the evening, ain't we got fun? You know, that little song that was very, very popular. Dorothy Parker was like that. She outwardly, she gave this impression of fun, 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 and constant activity. And but if you take the time to read what she's written, you'll know that fun, fun, fun is not at all what it was all about to our Miss Dorothy. Thank you.
All right, well, I was going to talk about one more person, but since we're doing this a second time, well, not this a second time, but a second part, I'll save them for next month. Anyhow, I'd like to thank the Blueberry Patch for hosting us. I'd like to thank Ink Tank and its participants, Martha Muzzy, Carol, and Kurt Thompson.